listen, never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
We know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Get on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
All right, there's no human being I'd rather talk to right now than Austin Davis. Fact. Hey, how are you? Good?
Doing well. How you doing, Rob?
Awesome. I'm doing awesome. But I mean, it's we got a chance to catch up a little bit. You're called up to the Padres. What a great story. What a great moment. It was great to see you. I've always enjoyed when, it's cover the Red Sox and always enjoyed our conversations. You taught me a lot about sliders. You taught me a lot about pitching, so I appreciate it. But I do want to go, Austin. I want to go quickly, sort of where you've been, and I think this is a great. This is a jumping off point about we want to educate and inspire and entertain. Your perseverance and where you've come out on the other side here is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So I could rattle off your Wikipedia page, but I'm not going to do that. I want you to take me through what has been going on with you in the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, after the Red Sox released me, I went to the Twins for a couple outings, and the Yankees knocked me around again, and then the Twins released me, and then I just took it to the house for the rest of the season, tried to figure out what I wanted to do next. I knew I needed to make some adjustments, but I wasn't sure what that looked like. And so with the teams that were interested, Houston, I thought had the best chance for me to figure out what was next, do a little development, a little experimentation. So I went there and we did a lot of that. And they were great with me over there. I had a ton of questions. I signed in November and I was texting them 4 or 5 times a week, talking on the phone on them all off season, developing new pitches and trying to figure out how to mostly get right-handed hitters out, because lefties I feel like I did a decent job with, but a lot of walks to righties, a lot of damage, a lot of slug. So just trying to figure out, how to get that at bat done. And not all of it worked. And it was a long, slow process. And I walked a ton of guys and ended up getting released in June. Went to a few different places. I worked with my mental skills guy. His name's Buddy Biancalana. Worked with him for years. So
yeah. I know Buddy Biancalana. Yeah.
So I've been working with him since college. So I worked with him for a little bit in Kansas City, flew out there. And then I worked with Casey Upperman, who a lot of guys go to actually, and tried to clean up some mechanics. Thought maybe if I could just get the mechanics dialed in, and maybe if I threw some more strikes, I'd be better. And then ended up building up as a starter, went to indie ball, and I just wanted to throw as many innings as I could. So I started 4 or 5 games for the Lake Country Dockhounds in the American Association, and did a little bit more of just trying to pitch, and found out that I think the way my mechanics work, dropping arm slot is my best option to pound the zone and kind of get off barrel. And I found that out by getting touched up in an indie ball game. So I was 4 or 5 runs deep.
So take me through that. So you're like, so when you think indie ball, right? I mean, this is a guy, you are a guy who's pitching a postseason game not that long ago. You're a guy who has over 100 major league appearances. And once you go to indie ball, and people go to indie ball, and there's great stories from indie ball. But to your point, when you say I got touched up in indie ball, that must have been sort of a fork in the road moment for you, right?
Yeah, the hits were not as much, because hitters are good no matter where you go. It was not pounding the zone again and not throwing strikes and giving up runs. I think I was in the 2nd or 3rd inning of another game where I threw. I don't know if there's stats out there for this, but I threw in my 2nd or 3rd start 130 pitches in an indie ball game, just trying to find the zone. And it's indie ball; the players are good, but also I've had some success. I was able to make it through innings, but if it was a major league game, I would have been knocked out in the first. But I just kept going, trying to figure it out, and it wasn't happening. And then mid game, I just decided to drop arm slot and throw like I'm a second baseman. just like I'm playing catch in the backyard with my friends. And then I actually started throwing strikes and thought, okay, there might be something here. I felt like it was submarine. It was really only like a foot, but going from 6.5 feet to 5.5 feet ended up being the change. And yeah, when you're coming off pretty much a full calendar year of, because pretty much mid-season 22 with the Red Sox, from then until when I was in indie ball, it was a full calendar year of giving up runs pretty much every outing. And when you get to that point, you're willing to do anything. So
That's incredible, though. I mean, you're talking about mid-game. So what are you sitting in the dugout and you're saying, why not? Let's drop my arm slot by a foot.
that was mid at bat.
Was it really?
I was in the middle of the outing. I just walked a guy. It was 2-0 to another guy. And I mean, and they have data there. But I don't know how reliable. I never really saw it. I don't know how reliable it is, or it's through Rapsodo versus Trackman. And I was pretty confident no teams were looking at what I was doing there. So I felt like I had the freedom to kind of just do whatever I wanted to do, and thought, how bad can they go? And then, that was the catalyst for then getting that dialed into a legitimate game plan that we're using now.
So you do that and then it works. Did it work right? Did it feel like it worked right away?
Yeah, I ended up going a couple innings scoreless, but more importantly, no walks. The strike percentage went through the roof. And then the next outing, I went, I think like 5 innings, 1 walk, something like that. So, pretty much right away, this is going to work.
So after you start seeing the results from that, you're like, okay, we're back on track. Were you confident that teams were going to show interest? And obviously the Padres did show interest, but what was the mindset after that? Where you said, did you feel like you're sort of back on track?
Yeah, well, the mindset after that was going back to a facility, getting video of it, getting on the TrackMan, showing teams, hey, this is the slot, this is what it's doing. I invited a lot of teams to come watch full length bullpens, 2-up bullpens, show, hey, over course of a couple weeks, over course of 60 pitches at a time, I'm throwing strikes. And teams were still, the year was so bad in 23 and then the second half of 22 that teams were still, we'll wait and see. And I'm sure you guys have seen minor league free agency in the last couple of years since the new rule changes. It's a dogfight out there. So I always had my eye on trying to go pitch somewhere, whether it was the Dominican or create some type of like live BP setting where I can get in front of hitters and show teams that I can throw strikes for a long period of time. And yeah, lucky I got to go to the Dominican.
So when you go to the Dominican, did you feel like, is that when you felt like teams started believing? Like you said, the minor leagues, it's tough, man. Like
it's tough.
It was,
tough.
We especially this past year where it wasn't only minor league, it was a ton of free agents. We see the numbers, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of guys unsigned and sitting there in March. And so, but did you feel like like you said, you go to the Dominican, you're getting this momentum, you do have the track record from, before things went south in 2022, but how did you feel coming out of there?
Yeah. Well, first on the free agency thing, there's a lot of good players out there now. And I think it's a lot easier to find those players. And it's a lot easier to know what you have in the lower levels. And that's part of it. And then they, cut down the rosters. So, but coming into camp, even with the Padres and Houston and these other teams the last few years, these guys in the lower levels are good. So it makes sense why they don't want to bring someone else in, because they're going to have to release someone. And so, yeah, you have to go find alternative routes. But when I went to the Dominican, I didn't know what to expect. And there is some cool stories in here. So they came in, they said they needed a left-handed starter. I have all of 4 indie ball starts in the last, whatever, but I convinced them I could do it. And I thought when I showed up that I was, hey, I'm going to start. It's good. And they said, do you want to throw a live BP? And I said, yeah, definitely. So I threw a live BP, and I didn't know at the time until later, but that live BP was kind of like, let's see what we got with this guy before we give him a real chance. And so there was a moment in there where the manager, Fernando Tatis Sr., was watching me throw. I have Miguel Sano, Fernando Tatis Jr., and I think Profar too might have been hitting in that one. hitting against me and giving him feedback, and then him making a decision on whether they were really going to give me an opportunity or if they were going to do something else, throw me in the bullpen or go with, there was a couple other pitchers that they could have gone with. And lucky for me, it went pretty well. And then they gave me an opportunity and I was able to run with it. But it's just interesting to look back on, there's these catalyst moments dropping down in the middle of an indie ball game or a seemingly innocuous live BP and on a Monday in the Dominican that set, the dominoes in place for me to be here today.
It's so awesome. And so when you not to be too dramatic about it, but when you do get the call to go back up to the big leagues, you've been in the big leagues, you've lived the big league lifestyle, but after everything that you went through, when you get that call to go to ultimately it was Boston to meet with the team, did that hit different? I mean, did you start thinking about those things?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's the debut call, which is very cool. And then there's the opportunity you get in the middle of your career where you're, for me, it was 21, 22, 20, 19, kind of those years in the middle where you're getting up and you're getting a chance and you're trying to get your feet settled and become a dude. And then there's an opportunity like this where you've failed a lot and you didn't give up and someone chooses to believe in you, whether it's my family, my agency, my coaches, like with the Estrellas, with Tatis, or the Padres, where they come up, they already have 3 lefties in the bullpen and they give me a chance to come up. And I think that one hits just extremely special because, especially my family, they made a lot of sacrifice. I went to the Dominican by myself. My wife was home with the 2 boys and our dog, taking all that on. Agencies making phone calls left and right, getting told no, and they persevered and got me to the Dominican and got me the job in San Diego. And so I think when you see all the effort, I'm going to put effort in. I'm an athlete. I'm going to try and compete. That's there, of course. But the effort that the people that are in my corner put in for me to be able to still do this is makes it very special for me, just as it relates to them.
How different does it feel? Like when you're pitching, as we sit here, you've pitched 3 times for the Padres. And like you said, I mean, you have over 100 appearances in the major leagues. I mean, you've pitched in big games in the major leagues. But when you're pitching in the Padres uniform, besides having an arm slot that's a foot lower than what you had before, how different does it feel for you? Or doesn't feel? Maybe it's just like, hey, there we go, pick it up where we left off.
Yeah, it feels like you're playing with house money. I got nothing
really?
to lose now. So no one's, I mean, what are they going to do to me? Hit homers and I'm going to walk guys. And, I've walked off the mound sad plenty of times, disappointed plenty of times. So there's nothing that anyone can really do to me. So, especially from the perspective of losing indie ball games, like I've lost indie ball games in the last year and I've pitched in the big leagues in the last year. And so, if it goes well, I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen. Or if it has a chance to go well, I'm going to do anything I can to make that happen. And if it doesn't, that's just is what it is. I'm as prepared as I'm going to be. And I think what I'm doing now is my best opportunity to be a dude in the big leagues. And if that's not good enough, then there's literally nothing else I can do. I've been doing this for 10 years. So
well,
feels free.
I'm going to morph into the what I love also talking with you about is the wonkiness of pitching, and which is so in the last couple of years, this is the, all right, we could talk about, this is the wasabi hot tech conversation about technology in baseball and the 2 of them colliding. And like I said, there's not a lot of people I would rather talk to about this, just from our conversations about shapes of sliders and things that are going on. And like you said, there's not a lot of people who would be in tune with themselves enough to even have that sort of mid-at-bat alteration in the independent leagues. Tell me, in the last couple of years, some of the things that have really, really evolved and changed when it comes to the art of pitching, when it comes to technology, I guess.
Yeah. Well, as it relates to technology, I think teams are very good with their models on what they expect for the performance of pitches. So for me, with my arm slot, my release angles, extension, all the different factors of how I release the ball, what shape does the pitch have to be at what velocity and what locations to be successful? And you'll see Houston had some really good models. San Diego has great models. You'll see these clouds that are, essentially blue is good, red is bad. And if you throw to these locations, you're going to be safe. And so you'll see with different pitches against different hitters, hey, you don't have a lot of wiggle room with that pitch. And so if you increase the velocity or you increase how dramatic the shape is moving for for a sinker, more horizontal break, more killing more vert, having it drop a little bit more, you'll have more room to miss. You'll see it like a Tanner Houck. That guy can miss in a lot of places and be very successful. Cutter too, with his cutter and all of his different pitches. He gives himself space to miss because of how nasty the stuff is. And I think you see that with a lot of guys in Boston, especially in the last year, developing whether it's gyro sliders or sweepers or sinkers to add to a mix, giving them a pitch where they can attack the zone and be off barrel. So teams, I think, have become really good at experimenting with players and saying, hey, let's try a sinker. Nope, that's not going to work. The shape isn't good enough for how hard you're throwing it. And let's move on to a different thing. Let's try a gyro slider. And so I think for me in the last year and a half, that's the biggest change I've seen.
Is there one bit of machinery, I guess? I mean, we have TrackMan, we have, Hawkeye, we have these things. Is there one thing that you feel is more useful than others? Like all of it is information. This is one of the things we can't get twisted. Analytics, technology, all of it's information. But is there one or two things that you feel like, oh, this has really, really been useful when it comes to what you're talking about?
I think the slow motion cameras are the most underutilized piece of equipment we have, just because when you throw on them, you get to see exactly how the ball is coming out of your hand, exactly how it's moving. And we have enough data and enough video for the way the ball's supposed to be moving and what it's going to be doing on your edgertronic to make the adjustment really fast. And you'll see this with guys like Bauer and some other people that post on social media with the edgertronic. You can see, okay, I'm trying to throw a sinker. The flat part of the ball needs to be facing in a specific direction. It's just a little off, or the spin axis is a little off. You make one or two small adjustments, and then all of a sudden you have an elite sinker versus one that's kind of eh. And so I think the ability to make quick adjustments, and especially in-season adjustments, the edger is the biggest piece for me.
Has that evolved in the last couple of years, or been more accepted, or been more prevalent?
More prevalent for sure. I think they've always been using it, and I think with the major league in-game cameras, you'll see these replays of slow motion. Every once in a while, a guy will throw a nasty pitch, and the broadcast will show it in slow motion. I think teams have been looking at it for a while, but I think the ability to understand, to look at it and then understand, oh, that's a little bit off on the axis, or the seams aren't in the correct spot, or it's coming off his finger and his middle finger's kicking it on the way out, which is taking it off axis. That knowledge is fairly new, at least as far as it's being prevalent.
Yeah. So when you're talking about this stuff, well, first of all, if you had mentioned something about telling pitchers, pitch here, pitch this pitch here, this is what's going to be, I'm paraphrasing, but this is what's going to be the most effective. Whereas obviously you have to face different hitters, but has it become more of pitchers do your thing? And I remember Matt Strom saying this, like he said, I worry about me, right? Not everybody's about, but is it become more of pitchers? Your stuff is so good, or can be so good. If you do this, it's going to be more important than stressing out about who you're facing. Or am I being too simplistic?
No, that's good. Strom, fortunately for him, that guy doesn't miss, and he's got nasty stuff, so he has the luxury to only worry about himself. But the point is right. Yeah, I mean, with the stuff that we're throwing, if you're putting it in zone in good spots, you're gonna be in a good position. But at the same time, if I have a two-seam, a cutter, and a sweeper, and the two-seam grades out, let's just say on like an 80 scale, if the two-seam grades out as a 40 against this hitter and the cutter grades out as an 80, well, why would I ever, unless I'm using it off a specific sequence, why would I ever risk throwing the two-seam just to throw it? I'd have to have like a specific purpose. Like I just went cutter up and in, and he didn't want any part of a fastball inside, so now I'm going to bring the sinker front hip, like guy like Aaron Nola does all the time. to then get back to the cutter or get back to a different pitch. So I think with the models and all this stuff, it's very helpful for understanding what kind of risk you're taking to specific hitters. And we all know like hitters have different holes. I know a lot of teams try and get Rafi up and in, but then if they don't, there's a ton of slug there, you know? And so it's like, you understand the risk you're taking. If you get it up and in and he's not 100% prepared for it, you might beat him up there. But if you don't, it's going to go a long ways.
Yeah.
So understanding the risk reward for each pitch in the location you're trying to go and where your misses are going to be has been very helpful.
So I've also, since the evolution of the term sweeper came, I haven't had a chance to talk to you, but I remember, obviously, we talked about sliders. You educated me a lot. I think you educated at the time, it was to mention Tanner Houck. He switched his slider for a hot minute, you know, but we were talking about Sergio Romo, I think, Kluber, the whirly bird, right? That's what was the slider. Yep. I've been dying to ask you about the sweeper. Yeah, like this is, so what is your perspective of this? Is it a term? Is it just a name? Is it any different than the whirly bird? What from your perspective, where are we at with this thing?
Yeah, well, the term whirly bird came from the Yankees. That was their term for it. Sweeper is, you know, what everyone's throwing. It's kind of the same thing. There's different styles. They look similar, but you have guys like Houck, Ottavino, Kluber that seem to get more. They get the same horizontal break, but it looks more dramatic and it looks more like a fastball for some people. And sometimes guys can throw ones that have good numbers that just are a little like soggy. And so it's interesting to see. Part of it is velocity, part of it is how you throw it, but guys that throw it in the 83, 84, 85 range seem to have no problem getting both sides of hitters out. But the ones that are, I gave up a double yesterday on one that was 80 miles an hour, and the location was decent. It was like low, working its way to back foot, but didn't make it there. But I think at 80 miles an hour, hitters have a better chance of adjusting to it. At 82, 83, 84, you start to see how type, break, the sharpness, and stuff like that. And then there's a second factor of the grip, and if it's getting the seam shifted break off of a different axis than the other one. I think the two seam one is a little bit more dramatic than a one seam one, but that's a little bit more.
But so what? So the flash to the here and the now for you, what are you throwing? Like, so you drop down. Has that impacted? Have you switched your grip on anything? Are you throwing more of a traditional sweeper? I don't know, but you know,
the traditional sweeper guys have been throwing for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I know. Thank. There you go. Right. Exactly. I mean, can we say that? Can we, believe me, Austin? We've had on multiple people who have like, listen, come on. It's more of a horizontal sweeper, slider. But anyway, I want to know what you're doing. I want to know what is this. How, in this, as the guy for me, who is educating me more than anybody else on this pitch, what are you doing?
Well, that's a hilarious dynamic that I'm the one educating you, but I appreciate it.
I just listen. I talk about a lot of different things with a lot of different people. All I know is that every time I talk to you, I learn something. So I thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. That must be a product of all the failure. It's like you fail so much. I got to figure this out. I don't know what's going on around here. Other guys are just going out there putting up zeros again. It's working. We'll just keep doing it. But for me, I'm throwing the same sweeper that I was throwing when I was there. It's on a two seam axis. Fingers are split. It looks like you're just throwing a two seam fastball, and then you throw it like a slider, and it breaks like a sweeper you were used to seeing. With the lower slot, what I'm getting is more vertical break up. So my vertical break is higher. So the ball is carrying across versus kind of dying down. And like the double I gave up yesterday, it didn't. And so it broke a bunch, but it kind of died down to where a hitter can meet it on plane a little bit easier. But in my couple outings in Boston, especially with the humid air, it was carrying up, presenting itself to be hit, and then carrying through and not breaking down like a curveball to where hitters can then just drop the head. It makes them have to keep on plane and meet it, and then it just breaks through, and they don't have as much of a chance to put a good swing on it. And so what ends up happening there is you get more weak fly balls and swing and miss versus trying to go for like a back foot swing and miss or a ground ball with it. And I think that's just a product of the lower slot. You can kind of upshoot it a little bit more, which we saw with Schreiber when he was there. He did that really well, where his low angle, he's throwing sweepers up middle, and they're just carrying through, and the hitters try and hit it, and then it's gone.
See, there you go. So humidity, good.
Humidity, good.
Humidity, good.
Elevation, El Paso, very difficult to throw sweepers. Humidity, but it was wild to go from El Paso, Texas, hot air, humid, 4,000 feet to sea level Boston. It took me a second to figure out how it was going to break.
Well, again, the way it was hot, but I'm glad that it's humidity. It's good for something, so that's good. So the last thing is another conversation we sort of had this time of year. I was interviewing the other day Josh Stein, the assistant general manager of the Padres, about this. I talked to AJ Preller as well and I found the GMs about July. I think July is one of the most interesting months, in large part for the trade deadline. You were traded at the trade deadline in 2021, part of it, which was a great move by the Red Sox. You, Hansel Robles, Kyle Schwarber, worked out, get to the ALCS. But you've been in clubhouses at July where this is a weird dynamic for every team, including your first year in 2018 with the Phillies, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, you got 26 guys that are in the clubhouse with you every day, and then the media and all these people are getting excited about how they could replace you with a better player. It's just a dynamic that no one brings up that side of. And if you're not performing, you're not performing. It is what it is. Or injuries happen, and it's like we have a couple starters injured, and so the media is posting out there that we're trying to bring in a starter, and it just is what it is. But I think in 2018 with the Phillies, it's my rookie year. I don't know what's going on, but what I did see was we brought in some guys at the I think on the waiver wire trade deadline, like the September 1st one, when that was still available. And what it did was take young guys who were getting a chance to play, whether it be like backup catcher or third base or whatever, and replace them with a veteran player who they hoped for more performance. And what ended up happening was they played fine. The performance was about the same as what we were getting before, but then those guys are getting sent to AAA, and those guys are now not coming off the bench at all. And so I think teams have to go make moves and try and be as good as they can and take that risk. But then there's also a risk on the back end of, if you have a young player that you're hoping to be a part of your team for years, in the moment when it matters most, after they've played 120 games for you, to say, hey, now you go sit and let this guy take over. I think that's a dynamic that you want to take into account, and I'm sure they do. And the other side of it, to be fair, is when you don't have a ton of veteran players and you bring in a veteran guy towards the end of the season, then you have the ability for those young players to learn from them for a couple months too. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I think clubhouse culture and how it affects the younger players on the team is definitely something to teams take into account.
It's really interesting. There's like 5 things that went through my head when you were talking. Number one is younger players. Younger players probably are like, hey, we can do this. We've done this. Let's go. Like, what's the trade deadline? We don't need it. We'll figure it out. I mean, is that too simplistic, I guess?
I mean, probably. And also, like, players don't really talk about the trade deadline because it's all in hypotheticals until it happens. And then all of a sudden you get a new guy, and then he assimilates into the team in one day, and that guy's part of your team now. So it's not something players really like sit around and talk about. But yeah, there's a guy who's starting every day and he's doing okay, and then he wants to not get replaced. Well, of course.
And the other part about it is, like you said, the last couple of months, you can have a young team and you can get to a point, or you can not even a young team, a team, you get to a point, and then there's pitfalls and hurdles and challenges in those last couple months, and then beyond, if you get the postseason, which you might not be equipped for, you don't even know you're equipped for, right? I mean, it's important to have maybe some voices that you didn't even know that you knew that you needed, right?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, if you're bringing in Max Scherzer at the deadline, like that's a different conversation because you're bringing in someone super elite. But then I think where it gets difficult for GMs is when you're bringing in a guy to fill like a very specific hole, and he's a good major leaguer that's worth trading for, but he's not, the Max Scherzer trade, Turner trade that the Dodgers pulled off a couple years ago, or like a Juan Soto trade kind of situation. Those ones, it's okay. How many prospects do we want to end up losing for this player or these players? The conversation for the other side is a little bit more of what opportunity are we taking away and what opportunity we have to improve based off how good we think this player is going to be. What hole is he going to fill?
Listen, you've done two things for me today. You've inspired me and educated me. That's all I want. So sincerely, it's good stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time. Even if it's just to stay in the air conditioning a little bit longer in Texas. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk baseball.
Oh yeah. Thanks, man.